Yeah.
Relative to the breakout group discussion, there was a talk about this as sort of an entire corridor, but the only ways we could kind of figure to reach it will be coming in at this end, coming in at the other end. This whole ridge has this sort of mix of conservation and privately owned parcels. So what happens in between might be more about looking at what you can get a hold of relative to land preservation and protection for those gaps to make it more contiguous, or some of the recreational continuity between them. But at the other end, we're also holding water up here that all comes down. And you can see just on the other side, while we may not have a whole lot of vulnerable populations, apartments tend to be as close as we get to vulnerable populations. It's sort of above that with the set of ponds and wetlands.
And here's the road again. And you can see that there is some land subject to flooding, some floodplain in this area. And there is this conservation land. This is the green hatching is the conservation
piece
land.
that we're looking at here, from there up. Being as they're in conservation, it means we've got a little more leeway to actually look for opportunities and get grant money on them to take action if there's an opportunity here. But that's part of what we're here to poke around and see if there are things that we think could be done. Get some good photo sets.
Yeah. Yeah, so just to help the viewers understand what the maps are, the pink and green show areas subject to flooding along the brook. The green hatching shows existing conservation land with some privately owned land between the two. And then this is the, I can actually hold them next to each other. This map shows the Nature Conservancy's Resilient Land mapping tool, mapping of ecological climate resilience. So the areas, the darker the green, the more resilient to climate change that area is from an ecological perspective. So we have on this road, this is scoring very high. So it's an area that it would be very valuable to protect as natural space, because it's likely to persist over time as the climate changes in terms of its functional capacity ecologically. So that's
And what are we looking for?
Let's go take a look down here where the water crosses the road.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to say in general what types of things we're going to look for?
What we're going to look for are opportunities where we have land that's been disturbed, spots that could have been wetland before the road came in or before the land was cleared for pastures. Any unique features that might tie in relative to monitoring and protection. And places where, because we've got a conservation connection, we can get community groups to step in and be a part of checking on these things or working on solutions, things we can modify.
Awesome. Nicely put. Thanks.
Okay.
All right. Get down here. Here's the culvert heading in. That one? Yeah, that one is not going to last. Yeah.
Another thought on things for some of the rural roads relative to resiliency. The utilities are looking at a lot of our wooded roads in terms of protecting their infrastructure, and they've been doing some enhanced cutting projects. One of my thoughts on how we can balance that with some of our habitat values is looking at these hazard trees and making sure that they get cut in terms of making snags.
Right.
For instance,
that one,
that dead birch there, it's not tall enough to be a serious hazard, particularly to power lines, but things like the aging pines,
yeah,
if those were topped at 25 feet, instead of being taken out entirely, that slows that process of things going straight back behind, because it's got this opening, and the openings are where we get the sunlight and the extra energy. So things are moving around and happening on the
Allow
edges.
the start to allow the
Right.
transition at the edges here.
We do that a lot.
Excellent.
We'll say cut that, top it here and leave it because it's creating habitat or shade.
There are far too many topics on which you guys are already one
Yeah,
step ahead.
way ahead. Yeah.
We, usually like, here's what you can do.
We are not.
It struck me odd here. There's a swale-shaped circle, like off of this stream. There's
Yeah.
a set of berms.
Get back down here. This is the back side of the culvert. Headed down. And then we were talking about these trees, not the one that is completely beaten up by the woodpeckers, and some of the taller ones, but note it's, as a snag, it's only about 15 feet tall. Does it? Do you run into trouble here? No, not you.
The shower pool is
Right.
This is not intermittent ever, is it?
No, I think it's no.
just perennial.
I've got enough watershed up from the horse pond and the pastures.
You guys know what this is a tributary to?
Let's see. I don't.
I think it's called Beaver Brook,
Beaver Brook.
at the bottom of the slope.
Okay.
And that crosses over to, mostly Foxborough, Littleton, that way, relative to the UR, their watershed. So
Is it the
anything that-
Assabet system? You think?
Assabet system.
Because the eastern part of
Yeah,
town is in the
it's-
Assabet
yeah,
system.
those ridges that kind of funnel off in that direction.
And the eastern part, and what's the western part in? Is that part of the Nashua that heads
Yeah,
back up to the
we're,
Merrimack?
we're a New Asco community.
Uh-huh.
So that's Neshoba, Assabet, and Nashua, Assabet, and
Yeah.
Point being, they're the headwaters to a whole bunch of.
Well, that's what Sarah and I were looking at this last night,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, this is interesting. The rivers come down, and then it sort of hangs out and heads north. And yes, it ends up being headwaters.
No, that's separate. That's a different.
So Nash is on the west.
watershed.
Concord, Sudbury, Assabet on the east.
Concord Sudbury's.
I think that's about enough to know here, and we can swing up
Sudbury
to the
Assabet.
other.
And so
end
those
of the,
head out to,
Those are, that watershed, I think, I do believe this is in that watershed.
Uh-huh.
This side of town is in that watershed, whereas most of town really is in the
right,
the river.
is in the Nashua.
Yeah.
Great. Beautiful.
Well, this is the side of town in which we catch that watershed.
where the water is heading.
Gotta keep up on what they're doing as well.
Swing back
Yes.
and do the other side.
Yeah, are we going, we're going in number order, I'm assuming?
Number order,
Okay.
yeah.
Because we were, when we were dividing them up, I was like,
So yeah, let's
he's
go
still
up
able
and
to do
take a
every
look at
other
the
one.
other end of this string of ridge and conservation.
So we're at the next location. Give me that description again.
So what in effect we wanted to see is the relationship of that land and water. So the drive up here, which I'm sorry if you're online you've missed, is probably the most interesting part because it is that mix of residential conservation, lots of water
Right.
coming across, some retail, real estate signs for pieces of land that are going up or coming down, portions of orchard and agriculture, but also on the opposite side, a whole lot of homes with large stretches that have been cleared for lawn with the great big house in the middle. Something we might consider for conservation at that end ends up being communications as to how they should be managing land if they want to improve upon some of these ecological functions. Now we're going to ask our agent if there's a better way to get down towards the conservation areas.
So yeah, we're in. This is all part of the watershed into the pond, and it's interesting. I may leave the camera on for us for the drive for some of this and give you an image of some of what the
We discussed the region, but we didn't
landscape
get like
is
a
like.
clear, go to this. So I had to kind of
kind of.
pick the top and the bottom.
Just like to note for all you architecture fans, I did pass Morris Smith's house on our way up here.
I would say we should go. So this is the access point. We went by that other little development that I don't know. It looks like a little palatial estate.
Yeah.
Where the beaver pond is, and that's like right at the top of this hill too, which then backs up to Black Pond as well. It's a 4-house subdivision, so that's a little bit of a private. I mean, we can go down it and take
Right.
a look if you want on our way back out, because we have to go back up that way.
Right.
You want to stop and look at that as well.
Maybe a drive-through.
Yeah.
Now this is some of the newest development, and
Well-
it's newer, but
Newer,
clustered.
yeah, for Harvard, it's very new.
Yeah, for Harvard.
Yeah.
But what I see that's frightening here is all the ailanthus. Relative to being a place that's production for apples, with the spotted lanternfly coming, my friends are hunting it down all over Pennsylvania. It will get here eventually, and this is the invasive host species for that spotted lanternfly, which is devastating to apple crops, nut trees, a lot of our most valuable hardwoods. That could make a serious burn off for, carbon in soil, but a big economic impact.
Right.
Additionally, it's also an allelopath, so it's poisonous to the plants around it. So this is one of those spots where when we've got developments, particularly when they are adjacent to conservation land, those are the scary things we want to avoid. Not the glamorous spots like the one that's closest to it, but the one that there's a whole bunch of.
Yeah.
And all that down on that side, all along this wetland.
Oh yeah, no, I like the
Ailanthus. It's called the tree
Always
of
got
heaven,
something good to
tree
say.
of heaven.
because of the palm-shaped branches.
Which it is very
Definitely
Yeah.
not.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
In England, where it's wet all the time, they've got it as a street tree. It's lovely and has good form and is sort of blended in with all the things that they have there. Here, it's dangerous. So, relative to any new development sites, those are some of the things we can look for and try and manage to protect our orchards.
Do they have a crossing that they're required to do down that crossing right there?
Good.
Good.
Okay.
This development actually, even though it started like say in the early 2000s, is just about being completed finally, and should be turned over to the homeowners association soon. And they're actually working at making up some plans to control invasives and clean out. So I was out here not that long ago with Niche Engineering, who's been doing all the peer review here, to clean it, because that crossing has just been kind of left. And nobody's really been, it's very overgrown. So they know that they need to kind of make that.
Good. I'm glad the community's right
Yeah,
on top of
there
it.
you are.
They
Very much,
know
yeah,
what
very
they're
much
looking
involved.
for.
Yep.
Cool.
that, I think we can move on to our next sites.
Okay, didn't you want to stop up the hill here around the corner, and see like the upper side of it, wet pond, or do you think that?
I think we've sort of seen it by driving back and
Okay.
forth over
Yeah.
those pieces
Okay.
and have an idea of what it is we're looking for.
All right, so we're off to this time. Let's make sure I know where we're going. Shaker Road. So we're gonna actually kind of backtrack a little bit. where we
Okay.
just came from, Slightly.
Cool. Hey, I've been doing it all morning. All
Well,
right.
when I first started, when they first started letting me out of the office as the agent, I only go back to Mass Ave and work my way from there.
We are on Shaker Road. There's the sign for you. We've been following up that road that takes you up to the other side of the wetland. We're now down in the base wetland.
I'm looking for, relative to some of these older areas, end up being things that were done for flood control or drainage. Like right now, we're standing in between with probably really decent agricultural land relative to most of Harvard.
Yeah, I bet.
The wetland. But as you head down the road, it comes out as a stream, and it's a perfectly straight stream. It's been channelized.
Yeah, I saw that driving up. You look at it, it's like, that looks like somebody cut it.
Yeah, and that helps to drain a wetter piece of land so that you can farm it effectively. But relative to ecology, we kind of want winding bends in our rivers for more edge. The edge is what's most valuable and for slowing things down. And infiltrating. That's interesting.
So we just thought we'd take a look at the maps here.
So while we're setting up on the maps, listen, bunch of old houses right
So
here.
we're in Shaker Village. So we're in the old Shaker Village where Ann Lee and the Transcendental. I can't even say the Transcendental.
Transcendental.
Thank you.
That's the one. Yeah.
We're settled. So yeah, a lot of nice old, adorable houses.
Yeah,
Part
and
of
well,
This is one of the 2 historic districts in town.
and it's just this section right here.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Actually, once you got past George Watkins House, the right is the last one in the village, and then there was a long driveway that you saw on a piece of conservation land that we now own a field, and then you got to 102, and then that you're out of the district. at that point. That's when
Okay. Great. Good. Fabulous. Thank you. That's the kind of stuff. I'm a building guy, right? That's
Yeah.
the stuff I notice.
That's why you were so slow. Everyone is so slow coming back. Me, I'm just driving along like
I
seen it
screwed
before.
up. So
Yeah, I
the
apologize.
The guy that I let go because I thought it was you originally was just saw the car come and that he was not a fast driver.
So just to orient everybody, we are located approximately here, up in the northern part of Harvard, northeast part. And so this yellow color means average ecological climate resiliency. And then there's some higher scoring areas over here. This gray area is
That's the golf course.
Shaker Hills Golf Course. So a golf course does not score well in terms of ecological climate resiliency, even though it's open space. So
Yeah.
that's interesting. And you can see that there are patches of conservation land in this area. It's also the green, it's the 100-year floodplain. The pink is the 500-year floodplain. So we're in an area, and then if we walk down the road a bit, you'll see obvious wetlands. So we're in a very wet area. And one thing we can look at is, we'll check the culverts. We'll see if there are areas to potentially improve flood storage capacity, for instance, opportunities for ecological restoration. So we can just start walking.
So before
down,
you move the map, I just want to point out something.
Yeah.
So obviously, this is all conservation land too, with a nice green. This little roadway here, we call it's not really, it's Maple Lane. It's not really a road. Conservation land. There is a home out there, but they have issues with this is where the beaver usually starts his problems, is here on Maple Lane. he clogs there, or she, and then it causes all this to flood. And you know, as you probably saw from these houses, some of these houses are
Yeah, precariously
right.
close.
yeah,
Yeah,
the-
impressively right on
the old,
the, yeah.
and you may not have noticed it. The old Shaker Herb House is just off of Maple Lane.
Yeah,
A little
yep.
bit, that literally is like, you know, the water laps,
water
right
laps up
the end.
against,
Yeah,
yes.
right up against.
And so what do you do with the beaver? Is
Well, so the problem is that the beaver is on private property.
that, and clear stuff or do little beaver deceiver
Because-
things or whatever?
You know, because most of Harvard, they're all on wells. So that's
Yeah.
the other problem
Yeah.
too, is that it becomes a well water issue.
Yeah.
And septic.
Mhm.
What were we about to say?
What's
I was
Title
just saying,
V.
Exactly.
fully private property, they can hire people to take.
Yeah,
care of
yeah. Oh, yeah, they
for
can.
them
But
if
if the
they want
town
to
itself
group up.
can't,
Yeah.
you know, we've
Right.
talked last year again, we talked about maybe putting in a beaver deceiver up there because the
Because it's
town
sort of,
has done it and they've
Is it-
worked in
Is
some,
it deep?
that's it, what we think the problem is it's really not the capacity to put the deceiver in.
So that's the one
Right.
thing. They,
Yeah.
they work their way.
They do, and we have a ton of them in town. We did one on Atlanta night. It was an actual victory for myself that I had done something right at the DPW.
Otherwise, it's
yeah, just give it time. It'll wait till it comes back.
catch and catch.
Relative to flooding and water control, the beavers end up being a problem for us. But relative to the landscape, beavers were part of a process that kept forests and meadows occurring and reoccurring, keep creating that change.
Yeah.
So we get those energy fluctuations, but also those periods when we can have some of the important species that are the counterpart to our upland species. Having stopped those and controlled them, we're seeing huge declines in like our airborne pollinator pieces, like a 75% drop in the biomass over the past 30 years for them. And that's about 45% of the foods we grow here are pollinator dependent. Third, but that's because there's corn and soy that don't need these sort of things. Here, they're extra important. So anywhere that we can do the things in our gardens, landscape.
We have a very strong belief here, at least Conservation Commission and myself too, is that we try to live with the beavers and not because we get a lot trapping permits submitted to Board of Health by the DPW director are actually run by me to make sure that there isn't a deceiver there already, and that we should be. And if the deceiver's not, we just had this happen. Is that he put in for one? I said, "There's a deceiver there. I don't know why we're trapping." And he said, "Well, it's not working right." I said, "Well, then let's get Mike Callahan to come back and make sure that the deceiver's working right, because we're supposed to be living with the beavers, not just killing them and trapping them."
As best
and
we can.
Yeah. They are our friends.
Even just from a practical standpoint, it's expensive and losing battle.
It's a losing battle. Yeah.
Everything you do will be temporary.
They were
other than
here
trying to find ways to live with them.
So let's take a walk down here and look at this wetland area, the edge of the wetland should transition to the upland, and any culverts that may be along the road.
Yeah.
And we'll just see if there are any.
Down to Earth that's Zac Efron did on Netflix is also
Oh,
very good.
really?
Have you seen that as well?
Yep.
Yeah, that is very good. That is really good.
Couldn't decide. Watch the video.
No, it was
Decided
good
it
because they
was
go,
just
it's
Zac
different,
Efron
every
being
single episode is a different title.
Making our way down to the culverts. I like the rock right there.
This side wetland looks a fair bit healthier than that side wetland relative to species.
One thing I noticed is
Yeah, interesting, huh?
this is really straight here.
Another one of those channels for drainage for
Yeah. So one possibility might be to add some sinuosity to that. If it was, we could find out.
Wait,
where-
wait. Add some what?
Sinuosity.
some
sinuosity.
sinuosity.
Ah, what a fine word.
If it was mixed, if it's not a natural feature, we could try to restore that.
So, that piece of conservation land that I mentioned, the field up that, so there's a house behind it, which is part of, we actually call that piece of conservation land Shaker Reservoir, because again, Ann Lee and her group, that's the Shakers, they had their reservoir. This is what they used for their reservoir.
Huh.
They want.
This is what they use for the reservoir.
Yeah, so the reservoir technically was, up the road away, but
I
yeah.
saw right there, the fire department.
Yeah, the fire department has
So
their fire.
did they build that as a fire pond, or did they just sort of?
I'm not 100% certain because it's been here for
Yeah.
longer than I have. So
No, I didn't know if they just sort of like it was sort of a natural pond that they're kind of managing.
Making our way down to the other side of the thing, of the culvert. Yeah, I like that there's boulders on both sides. It's sort of funny. So talk a little bit about the health of this particular side of the, what are you seeing?
Up towards the fire pond, see more of Phragmites and some of the Floribunda roses that were brought in as hedgerow plants. They were, the U.S. government recommended them as a hedgerow plant
Right.
for farmers. They kind of spread everywhere. They aren't a terrible thing because they do fruit and it's a decent nectar source and a good cover for birds. It just crowds out other species that we could have.
Awesome. Got the birch and
So
there's a little bit of willow or something in the back there.
has this area experienced flooding on the road?
Fine, we were just talking about that. That it probably doesn't, just because I mean.
this is not one of the
Culvert's
places
pretty
that's
good
so hard.
until you're a bit lower.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. This area does.
The road itself doesn't experience flooding, but as I mentioned before, when the beaver acts up, the house is further up the road.
Yeah, it's a little bit of storage here.
Yeah, a tiny bit. Couple drops.
This space sort of has an advantage over some other wetlands. Oh, there you go.
What was that?
There he is.
So, a pine marten.
Oh, that's
An
totally.
albino pine marten.
Shut the front door.
Are they?
He's checking us out.
Sorry, we're watching the pine marten. All right. That was just for you guys.
Yeah, that's rare. They're usually, yeah.
Bro, like, get a picture. If anybody gets a good one, I'm full of things. I'm scared to pull out.
That's
No
awesome.
porcupines today yet?
No porcupines. Sorry, we got pine martens. Oop, he's coming back. We're doing well in the spotting wildlife. There he goes.
Gosh, I love
There he goes. Bye, buddy.
That's fantastic.
If anybody gets a good picture, share it with me. Yeah, what?
He's busy enjoying this. With the stone walls out, they create that sort of a belly so that anything that's coming off the road at least gets to catch once and slow down so that anything that falls in untoward doesn't get to go straight in.
Right, it doesn't go straight into the wetlands. It's got a little bit of a
Right.
buffer of
Any sort of invasive seed that shows up, we'll at least see it at the side of the road sooner than we would if it were washing down a ways and then finding a home somewhere in the middle and setting up camp. So other spots where we've got a wetland along roadside, making sure it's got some buffer, some swale. That's about everything we need here. Now that we've got a pine mark.
Pretty rare. Well, good.
We have talked a lot of habitat update. Because we haven't
he's
Good
gonna
quality
flood that
rodent control too.
Oh, good to know.
Gotta love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, if anybody gets a good picture of them, share with me so I can
one. Okay.
let
All right.
National Heritage know we have them.
All right. So we're gonna hop back into our car. This is actually kind of an amazing spot.
Yeah, it is.
All right, and we will catch up to you guys again in a few minutes.
Old Mill Pond.
Yeah.
That one right
Yeah.
there. So
Right
we
there.
were
Yep.
So
Okay,
that's the
so-
pond.
a little bit of flooding, but this area here is a big floodplain.
Yeah. And this is a lot of farmland,
Okay.
a lot of horses. There's an alpaca farm down here.
A little bit of conservation land.
Yeah.
And then if we look.
Yeah, and then like I said, this is so this here, this all here is all park and rec land.
Okay.
All that, those three
Park
blocks
and
there.
rec.
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of ecological climate resiliency, here's the pond. Some average areas, but a lot of it has been given below average rating for climate resiliency. And we can see these are agricultural fields, so not exactly natural cover. And the it's kind of interesting, the flood, I'm not sure why the floodplain is not scoring higher than that.
Yeah, I'll just mention this on the now that I'm connected.
I don't think anyone other than person is going to.
Well, I tried it. That if you're using the coordinates that are on the maps, they take you sometimes some funny places. The first one on Sherry Road actually took you to someplace in Natick. So luckily I did not follow the coordinates and just used a regular map. But we're looking at the mill pond here. I was looking down toward the dam where Jillian is standing and starting to understand what's happening with this site. Looking across the way, there's a lot of conservation land up over the edge there. And some recreation land. And we're working our way down into the mill structure. So when this and when this was actually built?
No, but it's been here a very, very long time. So the family here, they go back, they go way back. If you notice, there's a millstone on the front of their lawn. The family also donated. There's a millstone on the common here in Harwood, which was donated.
That they noted by them.
They donated.
So they essentially ran the mill that this mill pond fed.
Most likely, yes. I do believe that the Bolden, yeah. So that's the Bolden family.
So there's probably some mill infrastructure down in here.
Most likely, yes.
Mhm.
I'm past two if I get from here.
Oh yeah, good. We'll wander into the woods. We're good with that.
Yeah. We enjoy being out.
What's that?
We enjoy being out.
Exactly. You can start to see the inlet here. So this is the inlet is Bower Brook.
Yeah.
So remember last time on Friday we were at up toward the headwaters of Bower Brook, coming out of the Bear Hill Pond. I will try not to drop the iPad into the icy drink.
So you can see there's some undercutting of the riverbank
Yeah.
there. So that's an opportunity for restoration, for beam bank restoration. There's also some other things to do.
So when might the mill have stopped working? Do you have any idea of the history of the flooding and fires and such? Yeah. So Casey Lee is across the way looking at undercutting, starting to understand what's going on with the soil. we will ask him about that when we get a chance.
And we're seeing some of that Iolanthus alpissmus, again, the winged euonymus, is in here as well. So there's some opportunities for invasive species treatment.
So we wanted to go in too is there's not that as you can clearly see there's runoff coming off, but it looks like it's just probably if you followed it,
Yeah.
coming right from the road untreated.
Right, okay, yeah.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, as we look across the way, you can see a little water track that is certainly somebody's going to be coming off the road, and potentially the much bigger road up at the corner. Yeah.
Yeah, because Mill Road comes right.
Yeah.
From Air Road, it comes right down. So yeah.
Right, Air Road. Right. Cool. Anybody have any questions from the viewing audience?
Yeah, I was knowing that stress.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very fresh. That was not here this summer when we were out here.
Yeah.
But I know that, and I've worked for the town for a very long time, that the person who owns this corner lot has been trying to develop it for a very long time. So, and time is prime apparently for development these days.
I guess so.
Yeah, we're out straight, so applications and stuff coming in now. So.
And
There's a lot being developed.
how much opportunity is there for development?
We still have some good large tracts of land available.
Uh-huh.
Maybe I could have you guys, if it's at all help with you guys. So we have an open space committee that's basically been, they just started up not that long ago. And, that's one of their primary goals is figuring out what's.
One of the things that we're really looking for is places, and Jillian sort of talked about it in looking at the maps, right? Is places that are highly significant from an ecological carbon habitat perspective, and so that we can identify those through a kind of systematic process that you can then use for management on your end.
You could even take the layer that's being created by the open space committee and put it on top of the resiliency one. Actually, I do believe that.
Actually, that'd be great.
Peter Dorwood, who's doing the maps, he's very familiar with the P&C program, the resiliency, and so he's probably already done that.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of our one there, pointing out the value of the lands is the resiliency.
That would be that'd be a great.
We've already done the work. So
right. Well, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
and that's that would be great. Actually, let's make sure that happens. All right, where'd Casey they go? Yeah, I know Chris has been talking about the open space committee and what they've been doing. I haven't heard specifically the mapping, so that's awesome.
Yes, actually, the chair self-taught himself how to use Esri GIS.
Yeah.
For our soils guys, we're on the side.
Yeah, what'd you
Yeah, we
learn?
saw you
Yeah,
over there,
I was kind of intrigued with
Yeah.
what you.
Where one of these big boulders has fallen out,
Right.
We've got a whole bunch of this exposed soil, and it's got this thick organic layer. So these just got oxygen so that they're blooming. And
Oh, it's
this
not
is
snowing
all
then, is
pretty, no, this is really well rotted texture. These are probably an ectomycorrhizal fungi. And it smells right for that relative to my mushroom stuff. But one of those signs of really good soil quality over there. And while erosion can be a problem relative to water and land, those sort of open bank pieces are a big habitat spot for some of our ground nesting bees, like the halictides and Lecio blossoms.
Uh-huh.
Some of these small ones that we don't notice because they're tiny, but they're doing a whole lot of work. They're really important for our blueberry, cranberry crops, those sort of things.
So that's interesting. So to some extent, the undercutting that is happening here is not necessarily a terrible thing.
Not necessarily a terrible thing. That's a natural process. It's a natural landform. It's that we do too much erosion and we dump things in very quickly. When it's happening in places like this where it's slow and it's been there for decades, it's a good thing. And some of the things we do for habitat are to create spots of exposed soil where we know they'll be stable and safe so that we've got those habitats so they can.
Cool. That's awesome. I'm just going to take a little spin down here and look through the overpass. The mill road goes over. And there, start to see sort of what's happening along the edges. There's the water course coming down off the road. And yeah, okay.
Jim.
Yes.
This is Rebecca. Liz may have already touched upon this. Maybe I didn't hear it, but this is also the one in the same Bowers Brook that also connects through to Bolton as well. So that's
Yes.
an ecological connection.
That's a great point. I'll make that here in a moment when we when I catch everybody back up to everybody. Thanks, Rebecca. That's a great great comment.
Yep.
Started looking at the other direction of the brook.
Help reconnect the floodplain.
So
what we're looking at here, what we found out, Liz was mentioning the wetland flagging is because they're going to do some work on the bridge. So that's what we're.
oh, that's what the okay, right. That's what the flags are.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, right.
So one thing is you can see there's a little undercutting of the banks there, and the banks are kind of set up from the stream. Now we have been in a drought, but on the other hand, we've gotten a lot of precip recently, so we may be getting back to. So we'd want to check where we are in that drought to normal condition range. But if this is sort of a more typical level of water flow, one thing to consider would be looking into reconnecting the stream bed with the floodplain a little more. And you could do that by putting in, building on what's here, there's some woody debris in there.
Right, and sort of
Just add to that a little bit, raise the water level up a bit.
have a word with some of those beavers.
Yeah. Ask
We'll
the
ask them
beavers
to
to
do-
come
yeah,
on
to
over
do-
and get to work. And
So Rebecca just mentioned that that Bowers Brook is one of the primary ecological connections
yeah,
to Bolton as well.
correct. Yeah,
And,
for all three communities. Yeah. And if you, I think we need to do some more work to figure out if this is a real need here. But
Right.
if you reconnect it, if it is a need and you reconnect the floodplain, that's going to reduce downstream flooding for people. So that's going to both restore the ecosystem and increase the ecosystem's resiliency, but also increase the resiliency of the human communities who are downstream.
Great.
So,
Awesome. There it is. GPS. Here's our spot right here.
We are here.
That's for you, Chris. You can look down the wetland into the fields far off in the distance. All right, are we on to our next spot? Okay, I am going to turn this off again, and we'll check into the next spot in a couple of minutes. That would be we're currently at spot number 4. We are headed to spot number 5.
Field, also at Bowers Brook, which is a different portion.
More parts of Bowers Brook.
Run into the water. We'll run into more water that way.
So we're at recreational land here, just off Depot Road in Harvard. And as you can see, sort of way at the end of that, the Bowers Brook continues down from where we were earlier, down toward toward Bolton. Is that way?
Yeah, Bozeman is.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of the brook.
Yep, that way.
Yeah.
Yep.
So off down to the left, it continues down into Bolton after a little ways. So what do we? And also we're next door to the DPW. Hey. There it is, Upper Depot, Lower Depot.
Relative to the ways we treat shade trees at the edge of the playfield, but there's nothing back there from the road side and the parking side where it won't interfere with the turf grasses, but could shade people's cars and the pavement.
No, it's just one. So.
Yeah.
And we're taking off across the field. Yeah, see, sort of flat. Yeah, well, not really. Oh, here comes a big hawk. Here's our wildlife sighting for the for this location.
I think these great wildlife sightings are because they're cheering us on.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, go get them, guys. Okay, which is what do you call it?
Tully with a T.
Tully.
Tully.
Great.
So there is a crossing.
So we're dropping into the conservation land, as you can see, and wetland area is just off the side, which is the Bower Brook. It's okay, wetlands area. And I'm gonna go. We'll take a look at the sign here in a moment. So no hunting or trapping, which is sort of interesting. Do you end up with any deer pressure in the areas?
So, yes, we had deer pressure. We actually just started this year a deer hunting program, a bow hunting program.
Uh-huh.
We started this year. So, a little controversial here in
I'm
the town.
sure it is. Yes. So on conservation
On
land.
conservation land, there are 5 designated areas in which bow hunting is being allowed this year. See how? But as of last week, our hunting log showed that no one had
Nobody
Not
had
the deer.
cut anything, right? Yeah.
but there are plenty of deer in Herman.
Yeah. Well, and I would think that in spots like this where hunting is not allowed, because there's enough residential stuff around, that you would end up with pressure on the both the land, I mean on the houses, but also on the forest.
Yeah, so they did as part of the whole deer management program, they did a lot of they had David Steinbrook from Fish and Wildlife come out and do a lot of telecounts and assessing the properties and seeing extensive
Yeah, just really observation to see
to
what's
make sure
actually
that,
here.
that what we were doing.
Yep.
So it really is. We try to tell people we're not trying to call the deer. We're trying to save the forest.
Right. Good. Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. Rich, who is has been on the call. I'm not sure if Rich is still here. Yes, he is.
Yeah. So I'm thinking this is an opportunity here.
Yeah. So I'll let you.
Oh, are you already doing things?
Well, we've done things, but we're not 100% certain how well they work. And as we get further down, I'll show you what we did.
Okay. 'Cause what I see here is the DPW yard with just a chain link fence between it and a disturbed slope, some natural forested wetland right there. And so it may be that we could do, we could create a little bit more of a barrier and restore this area with some more natural vegetation and planting. Could maybe plant some trees along here as well.
There might be a role for the trail actually to act as a little bit of a buffer for stuff coming off.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of.
I was just saying, this
Yeah.
would be an opportunity.
And as long as there's going to be a trail and it's going to have a trail swell, yeah. All right. You hear that? I'm copywriting the trail swell term. It's on the recording now. What's that?
Even I know this.
Yeah.
This isn't one of the lands that's being worked on, but the person, what he's just in the chair of landscape is aware of what the
That's the Oriental bittersweet. Sumac is one of my preferred competitors for these. So when we do mitigations, if you're not reoccupying it strategically right afterwards, you aren't gaining anything. You're just throwing more work at it. WER in the field, it's this mix of invasives sitting right over wetland because it is all open that with leather. That'd be a great spot.
This isn't one that's a target area for it because there's not a lot going on. There are some, and anytime we have to do anything here, I think we were rerouting a trail a couple years back, and we were very specific about
Raven.
where and how things were cut because we did not put all the leaves up there and just push them, and they were coming down, and we asked them to stop doing it, and they have.
Okay.
We also, Bowers comes around through here, and you can see on a GIS map, and the transfer station is over there as well. And we've done a lot of work with the DPW to keep blowing trash and debris.
Yeah, I was curious because there's a portion by the transfer station that looked like it might be landfill.
Yeah, that's this up here, right up here. Yeah.
One of the thoughts is what sort of cover types they maintain.
As we get down to into the wetland. Yes. All right. That's okay. You're
And here's
a feature. Yeah. So here's here's a culvert headed down through the path. It's really one of several. Excuse these. Taking a look at the other one. 16-inch plastic pipe.
yeah. It is,
Oh, there it is. Yep.
Snowmobile Club uses. This is one of the people lands that they use. And they replace this before.
PVC pipe.
Yeah. Then leads to Bear Hill Farm.
So one
Leads into Bear Hill, yeah.
possibility
And then back out of again.
evaluation
Yeah.
here
This
is
way, really.
the conservation trail to look at taking out the culvert and doing a little footbridge over it so that you have more natural flow and
Yeah, well, that's why I was asking if this like flows, if this is a flow, or if that is kind of. Footbridge would be nice. I do like a nice footbridge.
It would be. But it has to be something that can handle the snowmobiles as well. So.
Yeah.
Right.
We usually do telephone timbers and then
Yeah.
the white oaks.
So is this, what's allowed use on the conservation land?
Any passive recreation, and then we do allow for it during the winter, the
So-
snowmobile use. And then we have obviously rules associated with that.
Sure.
Same as the state for, it has to be 4 inches of that cover. And we have the ability, we as the Conservation Commission have the ability to shut down trails if we feel that there's not
Something's-
enough cover to them.
Right. And what about things like mountain bikes?
We don't really talk about mountain bikes.
Okay, we didn't say that.
There are people
Yeah.
who don't like them. There are people who love them. We actually have a member on the commission who mountain bikes all the time, who also is on the land stewardship committee, and there are people on the land stewardship committee who don't like mountain bikes. So it's kind of like one of those things that we just don't talk about.
Okay, good. Well, that's good.
So, what were we talking about?
Never mind. But yeah, I was just sort of thinking about, okay, the different uses and
Yes.
the different pressure that gets into the trail and things like that. Yeah.
The gentleman I mentioned who does mountain bike, he tends to know people who, others who are doing it in town. So if there's a problem, he knows who to talk to and just say, hey,
Right.
avoid these trails.
Right, watch out. Yeah.
Horse use, we have a lot of horse use.
Horses.
A
Yeah.
lot of
Great.
horses in town. So we have a lot of horse use on a lot of conservation land. So we try to work with them. We try to keep them off the trails during mud season.
I was gonna say the horse use has probably got to be way worse than mountain
Yeah,
bikes.
I know. I totally agree with you.
I didn't say that.
So we
Yeah.
try to live in harmony, but yeah. In the spring, I always try to get my notice up on the town website that says, it's mud season, please stay off the trails, or use the, we have
Right.
blue and yellow lace trails.
What's the law regarding?
And I'm sure skiing in the winter.
Curbing
Yes.
your horse?
Curbing your horse.
As in terms of, like your
Waste
dog?
management, you're
Yes.
saying?
Yes, waste
I don't think there are
management of
rules
your
for that.
horse, As opposed to, no, it's just free for all.
Yeah.
And, I was listening to Jillian's question.
Managing your horses.
Horse waste.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah.
Just free
We,
for
we
all.
don't have, I know some towns are very, I don't,
I don't even know how, I mean,
yeah, it's difficult to
it's not like.
control. You can, make
Yeah.
the rules, but I don't know how bad it is. The problem with my position as the conservation agent, I'm not, land management's not my job. Just because I work for planning, zoning, and conservation, I don't do land, we have the land stewardship subcommittee.
Yeah.
I very rarely get out
Yeah,
like this.
you said to have a.
Oh, nice to let you out.
I know. Right? Yeah, we have a
Um,
lot of horses. So I'm surprised that we don't have problems with it, but it does seem to work itself out. No pun intended.
Yes.
Jim, I don't know if this is a point that to bring up, but I do know there's almost a point of contention at some point with discussions between dog waste and horse waste on conservation properties and what's worse for the ecological impact or ecosystem services impact or potential impact to the soil and waterways regarding erosion or that type of material being on the property in excess at some point and where that threshold is. So
Yep.
just to be aware of it as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great comment. That's an item that comes up oddly. I mean, as you might imagine, it comes up in Cambridge all the time around waterways, and not so much the horse waste. Just saying.
Most places don't have large horse populations, I guess.
Yeah.
That's kind of why I was thinking along the lines of come out here with your dog and you don't
Right.
pick up after your dog.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
a problem.
I don't think
With
we've
your
had much
horse.
Yeah, it's a garbage bag.
in the
Yeah.
way of worry of dog waste and horse waste here. I do know in other communities that the problem with the dog is that, they put up all this signage and please pick up after your dog
Right.
and here's the bag, but then they find the bags in the woods.
Yeah.
Oh,
Totally. Oh, that totally happens.
So-
Yeah.
This is Rebecca again. I
Yeah,
was
sure.
also curious as you were
Yeah.
talking about the crossing and changing it there where you were a few steps ago. Is there a specific
Yep.
type of crossing that's utilized that has less impact but supports this wider, broader range of user types?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, Casey Lee, you want to talk a little bit about Rebecca is asking about adjusting, or both of you guys adjusting that crossing and changing it, so instead of a culvert, sort of types of crossings that can support the wide range of use types like horses and the snowmobiles and bikes and all that kind of stuff.
The types of crossings end up being going to mass stream culvert sizes, as in wider and higher. But in something like that, where you've got the snowmobiles and it's low and level, something with open timbers can be beneficial too, because of the light effect on water can mess with certain things. They'll know not to go underground. So if we can move those open as well. Yeah.
Okay.
You get snowmobile.
Could you hear that, Rebecca?
The other ones that-
Yes, thank you very much.
Great.
Others who put that new culvert in for it.
Oh, they put the culvert in. Oh, so that didn't. So
It didn't flow previously.
when
No,
did they-
it's slow. It's always there was an old, if I recall correctly, I have to look. I think there was a very old stone culvert in there.
Okay.
It was constantly flooding over because the stone culvert wasn't working, especially in the when they were using it in the winter, which then was just making it more of a mess. And so then we put it in. I can go back and look and see when we put that.
Yeah,
in,
cool.
so we can
Okay.
see how long it's been.
Yeah, that
I'd
would
say
be
at least like
interesting.
5 or 6 years. So
Yeah.
Uh,
And it
Yeah.
does seem to be working pretty well.
When they're not meant to flow, and we want things there so that they do drain across and stay wetlands on both sides. The open large stone that we do for utility roads, and sometimes with just sort of a one-sided dip to them, so that they'll move water through without actually changing the dynamic of what was there. But this has already been altered.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so I guess the issue is you have a natural wetland system that under natural conditions, the flow would be completely open there.
Thank you.
And now it's all necked down to one tiny little 12-inch
right,
culvert.
rather than
And
being
then
something
that
expanded,
is
which would be
harder for aquatic species to navigate,
Mhm.
and it just changes the dynamic. So if that were to be replaced with something that allowed more natural flow, the whole system would function better and more naturally. So that's the issue. Now, because it's just a footpath, that culvert is not a block to terrestrial critters. They can easily go over the trail, but where you have that in a road situation, then one reason to create a wider stream crossing opening is to allow the terrestrial critters to walk through on the banks of the stream.
Mm.
So one other thought, in terms of when you have culverts like that, in terms of climate change, where we're seeing warmer temperatures, if you constrict the flow like that, the water upstream from that slows down and sits there in a flattened area and absorbs more heat. So by opening it up, you're helping to maintain the cooler temperatures in the water, which then cools the surrounding area, reducing the heat impact. Plus, it's helping protect the species that need those more natural colder temperatures in New England water.
Remember I told you I was reading the book Eager?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's in the West, that's a huge topic around beavers, right? It's a whole crew of wetlands ecologists who are like, you don't want beavers. They create these ponds. The ponds warm up the water. The salmon don't like the warmer water. And it turns out that actually is not the case with beaver brooks in those.
That
And
makes sense because beavers allow water, it's porous.
Mhm.
Whereas when a human puts in a dam, it's solid.
It's solid
So you're really down to just 12 inches, but a beaver dam is letting water go
all around
through
it. Yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense that you won't see that effect as much with the beaver dam.
It's just sort of fascinating, sort of along that same topic.
And what they've also found is that the beaver really rebalance things with the speed. They affect,
Yep.
little cycle.
yeah.
Hold on to that. Watch out.
Okay.
So you can see the edge of the field here. Again, this issue about how the edge is created and what effect it's having, what happens to water through this process. There's obviously some plants on the hillside, but not much. Well, as we make our way back to the cars, I think I will turn this off again, and we'll head to spot number 6 on your playlist.
In the spring when everybody.
Okay, we're back. We're sort of in downtown Harvard right now.
We're right in the little downtown area. And this is there's a cemetery right over there.
Note the cemetery.
Yep. We're in close proximity to Bear Hill Pond, and the schools, Bromfield School and the new Hildreth School. And not surprisingly, the downtown area does not score that well in terms of ecological resiliency, but that's an opportunity. So that's one thing we can look at, ways to bring nature. There's actually a lot, relative to other communities, there's a lot of nature here, but there's also a lot of paved surfaces, a lot of buildings, roads. What else can be done here? So
cool.
That's, yeah.
A lot of graves.
Yeah.
Which at that aggregate of scale is
Cemetery.
expected, but at the scale where we can make changes, this is one of those meaningful places. Think of it like our risk board. Like if we're trying to take territory and cut things off, connect things. This is where we've got bigger opportunities than we do at some of these places that look like, see, this is the spot where we should be doing ecology and resiliency. Like, they're already halfway there.
Right. This is a place. Yes, the opportunity is great here. Well, this is kind of like, so this is right where we were on Friday when we looked at the with Bruce, and we looked at the school, behind the schools. Schools are right down there. And we're sort of looking at some of the other spots within right within town.
This is actually out on.
This is out, right?
Some of the things I'm thinking about for land management relative to the traffic-y remnant pieces. We just sort of default to lawnmowers because when you've got a hammer, every problem is a nail. And that's how we take care of these things and what we've come to expect. But it's kind of time to start shifting and looking at the margins, the gaps, the in-between places as something where we should be working on things differently. Choose what spaces are level and open and gatherable for people.
That would be Chris who
And
just drove
start
by.
defining their edges with other plants, other soils, different conditions.
Yeah, and probably soil management is not something that anybody's thinking about in these little spots.
No, but it's one of those spots that really should be doing some sort of job for us, and really it just costs something.
Yeah, what were you gonna say, Bob?
The soils in these kind of areas have a greater impact. If you increase the capacity of the soil around a lot of impervious area, you're having a larger impact on the watershed than increasing the capacity of the soil.
Somewhere back in the middle of nowhere.
And you're affecting more people, right?
Right. A lot more people touch this. Yeah.
Good soil in these areas that then result in the trees not dying or better have a large impact on the number of people that are walking by and interacting with that space. So there's in my opinion, there's more incentive to try to improve these concentrated, relatively urban soils to perform more function.
And part of that for Old Town Commons is you get a collection of really beautiful ancient trees. We've got sycamore and we've got linden and chestnut, the oaks, all really good habitat trees, but they're also all in the same sort of age range. So making sure that there's succession plans in town for the street trees. trails. Look at opportunities for that and what those species balances are for resiliency as roadway heat means that things like the sugar maples are going to be harder to sustain.
We have an elm committee, which I assume was initiated when elms were being decimated by Dutch elm disease, and I think it is now responsible for public trees on the common and maybe certain rights of way. But I think it's worth looking into.
Yeah, it would be good to get a contact there.
Yeah, definitely.
And we can cross pollinate on what sort of ideas they might have for tree selection. We've been doing a lot of work with elm trees now that we've got some species that are, blight resistant. And we don't have the Dutch elm issues nearly so much. I still find them, the little tiny mushrooms coming out the side of a hole on a tree, but we're doing well with them for street trees.
Yeah, we just trimmed one in our yard, and we're looking.
Pinholes.
Yeah. So, do we want to go look at stuff, or are we? Is this really what we're up to? I mean, this is a good spot.
Take a little ways down, and we'll loop back.
Sounds great.
I thought I connected
Plenty of opportunity to carry.
Bill Calderwood, who's I believe the chair of that committee.
I was gonna say, I feel like I just saw that.
So is that the stuff that drains into the system we
I
saw
would
on
think
Friday?
so, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Right. So we're
There is, I don't know if the town sewer system has any combined flow with sanitary versus stormwater.
I would totally doubt it.
No.
Yeah.
No, because we just got wastewater in the center of town a few years ago, and it all goes it's separate.
Right. Right. And otherwise, there isn't any. Right. It's all
Yeah,
septic systems.
Yeah, there's only
Right.
town center septic is the only place there's septic system.
So we're in the location that we were at on Friday. At the front of this, I'm sort of explaining to the listening audience. Our radio audience. There's the pond down on the far end there.
Oh, what the heck that is?
I'm noticing it. It's too wide here. And could the pavement be reduced or narrowed? And
I bet this is one of those things where there's a lot of parking and bus parking and stuff that happens here
that's true.
in and out of school,
Yeah.
and that by constricting it,
Normal school year, these spots would all be still.
Yeah.
I was gonna say when schools really happen and it's like this place just gets jammed with cars, and having a little extra space is probably useful.
Probably a good idea.
Yeah, they actually don't have enough parking spaces for
Yeah,
every
I mean,
kid that has a
that's-
car in town, and that's why they're numbered,
this
because
isn't
they have a
the-
lottery system.
So I was thinking of getting
That's
rid
great.
of them. I was thinking of
No, like tighten it up. I mean, this
Tighten it
isn't
up,
a
but
ton of space.
pedestrian
Especially if you're talking about.
Thinking less about tightening it up and more about ways you can widen it, but not pave it.
Make it more green.
Yeah, well, yeah, do stone with enough curb between them. We've done those for beaches where it was shallow, so we just pave the center, do stone, line it under the stone, and tie that into channels where we can do some of the bio mitigation.
And remember, there is this whole system that eventually catches it down here.
Eventually.
But we're just loading that system as time goes on. But
Sure. So anything we can do to spread pieces out,
yeah,
or the quality of the roadway edge there in the gravel, is fine for infiltration, but it's also getting dug by wheels all the time, or ice if there are things we can do to break that up.
middle school.
No, yeah.
Both.
So the middle and the high school are, yeah.
And so this is both middle and high.
Middle, yeah.
Okay,
Or spots like that where it's very obvious, so you can do some
hence the student
vision
parking.
and education.
Yes. For the high school.
So do we have any comments about the history of that pond?
That's one of the rain gardens that was put in for all the stormwater management stuff that was put in for Bear Hill Pond.
Okay, great.
What did you guys think of the system? I mean,
Behind, back there?
is it built to typical rain garden standards, or
I mean, Casey Lee's the guy to talk to. I was pretty impressed. I thought that it was,
Like, if
Yeah.
it's the Q over CIA equation, yes, I can do it. I just don't have to because I've got engineers instead.
Right, so there's a couple pieces of the rain garden, right? There's the stormwater reduction of pollutants into the pond, which is a key function, and that's what the engineer could speak to. The rain garden, but then you could just call that catch basin system, right?
Yeah.
So the rain garden implies that there's some other aesthetic and ecological impact that's
Exactly,
occurring. So which I think Casey could speak
Yeah,
to
the
very well.
difference in the soil pieces for the bottoms of our rain gardens will run a compost and sand mix. So it's got something deeper and spongier for that. It's a change in what you've got for species. So this looks like it's mostly grass, a couple of beneficial shrub species. But those are the things that you can continue to expand upon. But there are ways to turn those catch basins into a spot where the water comes in, hits the catch basin, flows beside the road for a while, and then for storm events can flow back out and continue on its way through standard systems. So those might be some of the ways that we can go to hybrid green systems.
are you talking about a swale system or something more?
Swale systems, yeah. But swale with the front end catch basin so you can get the heaviest metals, free radicals, sediments, and it's also the same traditional way the DPW guys are already cleaning things. So they don't have to learn new tricks. You don't have to try and get sediment out of grasses that have gotten into a swale. So ways to keep our swales clearer on their way.
When you say catch basin, you're talking for the people at home,
Right.
a concrete, basin that water flows into, sediments out, and then the water flows off to the top. And so that way it's easy for it to clean out.
Right. Rather than
Thank
being
you.
just a drop in and go through the pipe.
And so you're using a 4-bay of this one. It's actually a little spot here.
so there's a little forebay that Bosch is pointing out that probably picks up some of the sediment before it drops into the pond itself. And does that pond drain? What's that?
You catching the idling there?
Yeah, note the bus idling. Yeah, here we'll pan to the buses. Bus idling. Must be that time of day.
And
What's-
time of pandemic too.
I'd like to be able to get some idea of mapping of any municipal roadway lighting. In part because we're looking at, there are plenty of places where we put in lights that really it's not helping anything. We think of them as a security thing or as a safety piece, but they don't necessarily add up to that because it gives you that false sense of security.
What kind of spread
At this point, they've crossed over and the LEDs are stronger. But the bigger benefit, besides the energy, is some of their wildlife impacts. A combination of dark skies, because they're refracted lenses, rather than having to reflect things, you don't get the hot center bouncing back off of whatever surface so much. But beyond that, part of how they get more efficient is by taking out the portion of the spectrum and the infrared portion of the spectrum, so they're not doing the heat. But those are two pieces of light levels that have a much higher effect on our nocturnal insects, and well, us as well. Some of the studies have come, if you can get an LED light, it's cut out that ultraviolet spectrum that affects bees. So if you had a native beehive somewhere in the vicinity of one of these, it could get stuck out later than it ought to be, puts them at higher risk. And when those are down in the warm spectrum, down below 36,000 degrees Kelvin, the color temperature, you get less negative effects on particularly children for sleeping. There's one across from my house I'm thinking of shooting out myself. But,
Yeah.
I just did that on a video.
You did. He didn't say that. He didn't say that.
Are you a gun owner?
No,
Then you're not going to be able to do it.
that's true. Me with a step ladder being electrocuted. But under that 36,000, we draw less insects, we draw less biting insects, so you won't have so many mosquitoes
Go ahead, Neil.
close to people.
I was just going to say 3,600, isn't it?
3,600. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I wonder if
Yeah.
for-
We specify in Devon's we require 3,000 Kelvin as a max.
Some of them are taking
So-
advantage of it because the moths will go in a circle around a light and the bats are picking them off that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
moths, they aren't a huge benefit to anybody other than bats. So I'm okay with moths being eaten at lights. But if we can adjust them just right, we get fewer mosquito and human interactions and we don't affect some of our deal of the daytime pollinators.
Neil was just.
Yeah.
It's a light temperature. It's just it's the way you. Yeah. Oh yeah. Neil was just saying that they specify 3,000 degree lighting for their exterior lighting.
So 27K is ones I buy, right?
Right.
Yeah, 27 is lovely. You're way down there.
Yeah. Way in the warm spectrum. Yeah.
But even just having LED as opposed to the other types, it's putting out less of the invisible spectrum to us, and it's less of the visible spectrum to some of our key species.
Okay, so LEDs are actually better.
They're actually better, despite the fact that they look glaring at times. We're like, wow, this must be terrible. And we're finding, no, it's terrible for us. It's less terrible.
They flash.
LED lights in our garage.
At a certain
We're near an
distance,
airport.
does
I thought,
that
okay,
affect-
not leave the garage door
They
open.
can. When
The lamp.
fluctuating
Just in general, we just get
recreation.
So the good thing we're all wearing our bright vests, right?
I'm using you guys to keep me from being shot or run over.
Okay. Good job.
Hey Jim,
Yeah.
can I ask a question kind of back on one of the other sites about trail management?
Sure. Go for it.
When
Go ahead, Neil. Yeah.
Yeah, this is Neil Angus. Hi guys, thanks. When you have down trees along trails or hazardous trees, and folks are going and cutting them out, do you have issues with folks that are when they cut them out instead of just leaving them in place, they end up chipping them into the woods? Is there a problem with chipping?
It's less desirable than cutting it and laying it to the side of the trail. There are huge benefits to having the downed logs next to a trail.
Yeah.
Chipping it, sure, it's organic. You've gotten it out of the way, but you aren't creating the habitat benefits that you would be otherwise.
Right.
You're also
And
speeding
it's
up the process
The
of that
decomposition and the,
decomposition.
yeah.
yeah, you're smothering the soils and existing vegetation, right?
Yep. So to the full extent we can, get them to take the brush, pull it in a little ways, and stack them so we get thickets, so we get those sort of interlocking structures where things that need to hang a pupa can put something in, or we can get, good rodents like our pine martens can come in and out of that, the rabbits, other things like those down branch areas. And
Great.
So there was
Thank you.
when we went to the forest the other day. There was talk about this, and who was saying that they've had complaints about brush being piled, and was it Neil? It was you? I guess.
That might have been me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. In terms of thick brush piles that end up smothering the soils, like wood chips make it even worse because they're so compact.
You know, I think what you're talking about is probably a little different in that it's homeowners continually piling brush in the same kind of area.
Right.
Yes.
So it's a slightly different situation.
Basically making a compost pile.
Yeah. Denser.
There are advantages to certain structures. So when things are stacked loosely so that there are medium and small as though it were a tree that crushed and collapsed, so you get some small pieces and some structural branches that hold the air open for it.
Right,
Something
right.
done with those for parks pieces, we're trying to get those in parks and playgrounds, is get some interpretive signage on it so people know that that's why it's there, not, oh, you've got giant brush piles, how lazy of you. This is happening. Let's keep it.
At one point, I did this art project with woven branches, and I did like a meandering woven branch, which I think does similar thing,
Yeah.
but creates an artistic element to it. So it seems like, oh, this is intentional. And
Yeah. We've got some examples like that we can pass along.
Cool. Okay. Good. Thanks. Good question, Neil.
Thank you, guys.
As long as you've got the assembled expertise, right? Why not?
Exactly.
As we head down the hill there, is that what's the crossing down there? Oh, thanks, Liz.
You're in mine much less capable than
So the question that Casey Lee was just asking was about, so you look at the structure of the roads here in this little thing. It's like, is this little cutoff really necessary? Could that be returned to something managed for soil? So yeah, probably. Huh? I'm sure.
Interestingly, this land right here belongs to the Conservation Commission.
Mm-hmm.
So there definitely could be some reconnectivity of the two parcels.
Yeah, I mean they're dinky little parcels, but they are right in the middle of the roads and have a big effect.
Relative to sidewalks and the combination of longevity, ecological sustainability, looking at what we've got for base materials in these and how they can be utilized, but also reflectancy. Like when we do the concrete sidewalks, we've got a better SRI for reflectancy than when we've got the asphalt sidewalks. The bricks will last longer if we put the right base underneath.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you get some of those Cambridge sidewalks that go like this versus some of the newer Cambridge sidewalks that you could drop a nuclear weapon onto and
yeah,
they will stay right where they are.
Yeah, SRI is probably not a super big issue in a situation like this. Yeah, and there's lots of greenery, and it's a teeny amount of sidewalk compared to the
Grocery store parking lot.
grocery store parking lot. Yeah,
We need to do away with.
exactly.
I'm looking at the parcels with a high impervious. And like this is one of the major ones, right? And so I'm looking at the storm drains here, wondering where they go. Are they being treated in some way? Because the school, it seems like there's a very concerted effort, and they did a great job. Similarly, because it goes directly into the pond there. Yeah. Are you familiar with this area?
I'm not familiar with the management of it, but again, I can connect it to DPW because that entire parcel where the general store is town-owned land, and I believe the town does plow and salt that parking lot, and they also are responsible for the extension of the parking area and the area around the building as well. So.
Did this area come up on the MVP plan?
Lauren, that's a question for you. Did this area in the middle of Harvard and sort of the center of Harvard come up on any of the MVP material for places to do something?
There may have been some prioritization related to expanding walkability. And I know that we just finished the Complete Streets sidewalk project from Town Hall around the corner to Elm over there, and then on the opposite side all the way down the parking lot to reconfigure the parking lot as well. We have about 10 other complete streets projects that we intend to pursue related to pedestrian and bicycle facilities. We also are trying to get, as we walk down Mass Ave right there, we're trying to get funds for safe routes to school.
Right.
To expand the sidewalk network that way as well. There's a huge amount of pushback about sidewalks in the center. A lot of people think that it detracts from our rural character and adds an urban twist to the community. But they were dead set against this project here, and once they saw it, they said, "Oh, that's not so bad." So you've got that kind of urban-rural tension that pervades this kind of community.
So,
Right.
I mean, I have that impulse sometimes of like, oh, how can we make cars and people share the road better? And I think if people are willing to go 15 miles an hour through this section, it could work. Would that be possible? Right?
Well, I mean, and again, I don't know where the chicken and the egg sort of fits in this formula, but the problem that we've continually faced related to speed reductions is we keep getting quoted DOT warrant thresholds for road stretches that you need to have a speed test, and the speed shall be set by a certain percentage in the end curve related to what speeds are actually being taken in that stretch.
Yeah, so I think you can, in Greenfield, we just did this. I'm on the parking traffic committee, and we just made it 25 miles an hour speed limit by default everywhere. And so you don't have to do the speed test if you do that.
I think that, don't you have to have a thickly settled designation?
No, I don't think you do. I mean, so you don't. So I think if you want to override something, right, you can do it thickly settled and get the speed reduced. But I believe in Greenfield, it's all street roads in Greenfield are by default 25 now.
Unless otherwise posted?
Unless otherwise posted. But you have to post it on all the places coming into Greenfield that it's 25 because it's different than the state.
I'm thinking at the other end, the rule is very nice, but the actual physics of what's on the ground relative to what they can change to make a nuisance.
Well, that's where when you get to when you reduce it to 25, your parameters change, and then you can change the road, right? Change the shapes, which then will change the traffic, right?
So they'll actually go 25.
They'll go 25 because you're saying we don't need a 25-foot road. We
Well,
need a
so
20-foot
here's
road.
the thing. And I'm not a traffic engineer, but occasionally I play one on TV. There's the legal what you can do, which is you can do a lot, and there's the what the traffic engineering and transportation designers will tell you should do. And when you're doing that, you'll get into the things like you're saying, the speed tests and things of that nature, and your 85th percentile speeds and all of that, and doing lots of studies and saying, no, this shouldn't be a 25 mile an hour road. This should be a 35 mile an hour road, etc.
But and a lot of that has to do with the current structure of the road.
A lot of it does.
Yeah.
And what people, like you said, that's why I'm saying it's a weird sort of chicken and egg thing where it's the current structure of the road and what people currently do versus, crash data. Obviously, if people are driving 50 on a road and you have 1 million crashes, and all these crashes are being attributed to speed issues, then yeah, that shouldn't be the thing that dictates it. But particularly in the lower speed roads where you're not having as many crashes and you get into that weird, we're sitting and having this conversation and I'm looking at this street here and I'm going, wow, those are some big radius turns for like a street that I just don't even understand. Like I could probably go around that turn at 60 if I wanted to.
Right.
Or in a school bus.
Right. Yeah, but even a school bus, like you can tighten that down if it's going slowly. And,
Yeah.
Well,
and this is
key intersection. I was just as we're having this conversation, I'm staring at that thing going, that, that's a huge roadway now. Like, you could slow people down through it. There's no reason that you have to go that quickly, around that road. You would slow people down and have them take the much more deliberate turn onto the road and tighten it up. And
Well, and part of the what this conversation brings up is that question of, and who are these roads built for? Are they built to optimize vehicular transport? That's like, and why?
right, and what comes through? But what what big trucks are going up and down Littleton Road onto?
Well, there are a few. You get some trucks.
But he also made the corner onto the small street.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
I mean,
right.
opposed to coming up, what are clearly more heavily trafficked.
Another one that crosses for us relative to green solutions to human psychology problems is using shying effect and getting our street trees closer and the kinds with a spreading canopy. So you've got this, somehow having parameters on your vision will actually cause you to slow
Slows you
down.
down.
Anything
Mind,
close
yeah.
to the side of the road causes people to slow down. Which is why people inherently slow up. Maybe not being downtown Boston, but in most places, people will slow down going towards them.
Right.
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 Or even,
And where
But
you have
there's
a wall that's right there, even though the lane hasn't gotten any narrower.
Yeah.
People inherently, it's there. You feel like it. You creep to the side. And you slow
where the street trees are and where the power lines land can kind of limit our ability to do that.
Yeah, right.
You might be able to flip your power line to the backside of trees.
Yeah, but then you're like, you could hear, but up there when you're on somebody's property, it's like,
Most efficient route so that you can get those overhanging shade trees.
yeah.
She in the witness protection program doesn't matter taking pictures.
Making our way back across so that was kind of an interesting conversation, right? About sort of streets and street trees and width and speed.
Yeah, so Jim, what a lot of communities are starting to do now is like everybody's worried that, oh, if we make these roads narrower, it's going to make traffic all crazy and back everything up. So what they'll do is, just do what's called tactical urbanism, and they'll just, put in temporary measures to try it out to see how it works.
Right.
See how a
And
narrower
sort of
street
get
may
people
work.
to slow up a little and see how it goes.
See how it works, see how the turning movements work, see how it, slows traffic. And a lot of people are finding that works. And then that is impetus for then going ahead and narrowing the roads, putting in the street trees, putting in the permanent fixtures and features,
And is that something you guys have tried?
Yeah, we've done, bump outs to deter traffic on some smaller local roads.
Have you
we
tried
haven't
any
done
of the
that
sort of tactical stuff around doing temporary
yeah,
moves?
we did like a temporary bump out to see how it would work in terms of changing turning movements, and it worked really well. And then we ended up making it a planter, managed for stormwater runoff, provide, additional street tree shading and stuff, all the benefits that they were just talking about.
Cool. So
yeah.
Neil is just saying that they have tried this some in Devon's, and that they tried some temporary stuff and it worked really well, and so they made it permanent.
I think I did one on Grant Road extension. We did like a couple different studies, a little baffle at the end to make it inconvenient.
There you go.
So our next stop is number 7, Still River Road, Dams Culverts. And it strings up along a part of the area back of Underpin Hill Road.
Okay, and just for people that clearly in the floodplain here, there's and over here, we're in a corridor of high ecological climate resiliency value. So this is an area that it's really great that there's a lot of conservation land already, and potentially adding to those parcels will help protect this area. I will put these in the car now.
Great.
Relative to where we were with Tuesday, being just down from the dam, and there were some stories about the area between the dam and this road having used to be fields. That with Elizabeth Run Road and the stream, that it's turned into full wetlands.
There.
What is that? I think Bruce talked about how it was created by the sort of bringing the road bed up and creating that barrier.
Yeah, sort of blocked off, and that happens a string of the ways up and down.
I think even the Oxbow area, as Route 2 runs through, it kind of has that same.
Totally. Yeah.
Is there anything inherently wrong with that? Is it?
No, there are some benefits to it. It's just one of the things to look at, making sure that it still flows appropriately, that it is catching in the right places, not blowing out roads or overtopping them.
All right. Should we take a little walk?
Temperatures, flows, beavers.
We're headed up here to Underpin Hill Road. So there's two of them. There's a string of culverts. So, and all of this is conservation land, all of the wetlands?
Yes.
Ooh, that is a bluebird.
I've never seen one so vivid.
Wow.
Huh?
It's a bluebird in the, oh, it just flew off. Okay, that's this location's wildlife
He's still
sighting.
there, but he's not showing.
So what were you just talking about?
I'm just talking about like if you were to replace the culverts to meet stream crossing standards and have better wildlife value, better. In this situation, you have to make it you'd have to replace both of them to connect that wetland up there,
Mm-hmm.
that wetland over there.
Yeah. Yeah, this part is sort of,
Into that and then change the stream crossing there, right?
Yeah.
Part of that.
right.
I mean, either way you do it, it's big.
Yes.
This is not a small, short,
We're in
cheap
the
solution. This
let's
is a-
dream
right,
phase right here.
This is a big.
Good luck having the Mass DOT fund something like that.
Well, that's what I mean, right?
Here is, yeah, we're talking some habitat here at the edge of these wetlands.
We had a project where we, had a culvert. It would back up regularly, for 3 or 4 times a year. And then every few years it would overflow the road. We put in a stream crossing and it changed the hydrology above stream significantly. And the place where we had to replicate a wetland. And we'd done all the testing beforehand to make sure that the wetland would work there and the water table was there. And by putting in the stream crossing, we reduced the water table and the replication no longer worked. So, in that case, this small culvert was creating upstream wetlands.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're balancing benefits here.
Right. Yeah.
So you think maybe if that culvert was replaced by, say, a large box culvert, that it might actually change the entire dynamic of the wetland behind it?
Yeah. So you would want to do a study to see how that.
And even then, right? I mean, the study would help a lot, but even then, things might happen that you weren't anticipating. But yeah.
We know enough to be dangerous. But you have to couple of those risks and do some things. This will either work or we'll learn something very important. Another thought might be, relative to ponds and doing the process of drawdown going in the reverse. If this road then became a dam and the culvert were to be moved up, and if that were to be a secondary pond, relative to combining the issues of drawdown to get rid of milfoil versus having that open water and doing lily pads and things like that, where we can get the water.
Have you had flooding in this area?
I was just saying, that's something to ask Tim Hart about.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been here 2 years at the most,
Okay.
and mostly what I've been focused on is economic development. I'm a little limited on capacity. Even though I have been involved in MVP, some things I definitely are still blank slates for me.
All right. Should we?
Yeah, can we get to the next slide?
Okay.
All right, where are we now? We're at 9.
So I just wanted to say to everybody here, I said it before, but if you guys have questions that I cannot answer, which is very likely, please just compile them, send it to me and Liz in an email, and we'll get them to the right people.
Yeah, fabulous. Thanks. All right.
A bunch of young, dying white palms as the water table rises up and turns more of the land on the sides into wetlands.
Uh-huh. And so this water table has been raising for a while.
Yeah, yeah. There's more and more water.
Uh-huh.
It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just
Just
something,
worth
yeah,
you got to
something to be aware
recognize,
of
yeah.
and know where it's going to go, what it's going to do.
All right, I am going to sign off again for all the folks listening at home, and we will talk to you again soon.
So here,
Here's the railroad, so we're right down there.
this curve right here. So this is the railroad tracks across here. As you cross the tracks and go down the hill, you have access to the wildlife refuge. And I don't know, was there something that I saw? Railroad was one of the descriptors of this site. Is there something related to the railroad?
I haven't got anything specific that we're looking for relative to the railroad. Again, the list comes from places that were sort of recommended, and then looking at,
There we are.
yeah, where are our connections to strong resources and areas of weakness where there's some potential to improve.
It looks like most of the values on the other side of the.
Yeah.
Right.
on the other side of the railroad, yeah.
But up above there,
Uh-huh.
we've got the roadway coming down and catch basins all across it, and it's all dry open meadow. There would be the potential if you were to catch that drainage somewhere around and come across with it, and create some wet meadow, get a transition between the two.
There's definitely been issues with erosion.
Yeah, it's a great spot for bad things getting into the water.
And then you know, coming across the road, it seems like this side things going on there. Unless I'm wrong about where this gravel is coming from.
Somebody got excited.
I just don't know how you can live with it. These people in this Still River Depot neighborhood, so to speak, they are constantly they're perpetually upset about
About the hunting.
the noise and everything that comes from there.
To that sort of halfway between brush and meadow.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
Actually, it flows, actually.
Oh yeah, no, I mean this is a drop in lid. It's a structure. There's a pipe in there somewhere. I mean that's. Well, I guess that way.
Right, I presume it's just to take this stuff across the tracks.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it wouldn't be there.
All this from the roadway.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah, but then you can hear the water in there, which means there's a pipe coming from somewhere.
Somewhere else is dropping water into it as well. Yeah.
it might be, yeah.
Yep.
Could be.
Could be from right there. Well, I was just saying, it's the only reason this exists, I presume, is because you can't just have the water flow over the tracks.
Oh, it would probably pool right here.
Yeah.
And then freeze and then probably come over, feet over the road.
The concern here is that we have the oxbow. We have the oxbow, and we have this urban, this low. Presumably, there's some sort of issue with the upstream area here because it was really low resilience, right? So there's a opportunity to try to expand this high resilience into the low resilience, or increase the low resilience, and this might be a point in which we could stop any pollutants from going into the oxbow. Is that true?
That's about the size of what we're looking for. Yeah. For species resilience, we can look at compatible mixes. What's growing up on the hill, seeing a whole lot of solidagos. There's milkweed, just full of other things like evening primrose. Some good things there, but it looks like the thin sort of mix of forbs that you get after something has gone out of pasturing.
Right.
Pasture grasses are there. The Floribunda rose is there. We can look at some of the diversity of species there and see if there are other resources that are compatible to add. That'd be one of those spots where you could do it, and you could combine improving water quality with making some of the physical soil and water changes necessary to diversify there. Because there are plenty of things that they're just not going to be able to compete unless we,
Do some
give them.
reset it a little.
So who would you partner with in something like that?
That'd be one for Audubon, probably the refuge itself, tie in, try and get some of the state funding agencies, towns, community groups, and then tie it to a transportation moment. Wait for this to be one of those things that gets slated for a roadway improvement and say, okay, well, if you're going to improve the roadway, hey, we have these plans waiting, you should make these changes as well.
Yeah, that's definitely the idea.
Is this a roadway improvement? Where are you thinking?
As in, this is fairly new asphalt, sadly. If it were,
Well, but also, I mean, it's like, and this, it sort of goes here. Right.
It goes here, and this is a really popular recreation spot for getting into and onto the river. And down. There are good swimming places. The river is fast enough that it's sort of sandy bottom and clean and comfortable.
Did you hear that at the home audience? Good swimming places. They, my car, not Sarah's.
This side of the road and that side of the road are all part of that.
And if you look over there, this road goes down, and there's a welcome to the wildlife refuge sign down there. So, and then the river's right there.
You can take a little walk around the corner.
Yeah, I was gonna say I wouldn't mind walking down there a little bit just to sort of see what we're talking about. Oh, I see. There's the Oxbow sign. Gotcha.
It is a popular spot for recreation. It also makes it a higher risk spot. Somebody with a leaking truck or
Yeah, right.
wild one.
Oh, the river is
What
up there.
type of boat ramp? What kind of things are coming in and out of the river? If you've just stopped over in
Yeah, one
the
presumes that
Sudbury and you're
you,
bringing some
right, you got to do your boat cleaning and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
example of spots where people can run in. Yeah. In that case, a little more room.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, note the rope swing. Oh yeah. Oh, we're coming back. So this is the Nashua. Yeah. Yeah. This is still, it's not this big, right?
No, it was narrower.
Yeah. Into the wetlands. So if we're really going to do this, we'd bring our shovel. Oh, that's right. I was just thinking about that. Yeah, is that all beaver
Looks
pond?
like a little one there and another tiny one here.
Uh-huh. So the close one, and there's one sort of through the trees over there you can see, which is the pond forming behind it. And you can hear the hunting.
And little beaver dams in the right spot are terrific because they give us, you know, that sort of fluctuation of environment changing at the right speed. So we'll get all those trees into dead snag trees,
Right.
and a couple of the floodplain trees.
It's the other end of this is one of my favorite spots there up by the crossing where there's that just still standing water with all the snags in the middle that have the stork and heron nests at the
Yeah.
top. Every year around about my birthday,
Ah.
they return. And there's birds all over the place. And then sometime in sort of October, off they go.
I run into an egret out here once too. Very weird looking bird.
So, okay, why is this bridge here?
Looks like it probably was an open public road at one point. This is a sign. I don't know what the sign might have said. My stepfather actually took an old abandoned highway bridge and made it his house
There you go. Where was that?
in Hurt County, Georgia.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
Cut by the river.
Right. You can just see the boat launch through
Parking
there.
area, but that parking area all slopes straight down.
Right
to
into
boat
the-
launch, as
yeah.
opposed to having any sort of
No control.
yeah.
Yep.
control.
Bang, bang. I'm going to hand this all to you. Take that. And this.
Wait, which way?
I have to
I'm,
hit a
I'm
phone
pointing
call.
this way.
Yeah, you're pointing that way. Now, when you were ready to turn it off, just turn those two things off,
Okay.
and you can just park it.
Okay.
All right?
So wait.
I'll follow around, but I've got a phone call I got to be on
Okay,
for about
great.
half an hour.
Okay.
Yeah, because I called it.
Okay. And do this thing has to stay next to it?
It does. That's the internet connection,
Yeah. Okay.
and it generally has to stay out. You put it in your pocket, it starts to.
Yeah. Okay. Does this road go somewhere? You know?
Circles around the.
Just circles around.
She put a nice compilation together of what was happened in the MVP things.
Right.
And essentially what she is, the main concerns for that area were the sewer system and the capacity of the sewer system, which sort of sets the limit on commercial growth.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That was, and then some. That was the thing that really popped up around that area
Which area was that?
in the downtown area.
Okay. So
Now it's really wrong term, huh?
No.
so yeah, you need a different system then.
Well, yeah, or it's the perfect place for sort of the smart sewering model.
Yep.
You know, you could do a thing and create water that then fed into the waterways and you know, which would be clean enough, by far clean enough to do that. And it's a pretty inexpensive way to do it, and like natural systems will finance, and natural systems
Really?
utilities will finance for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Definitely something
Yeah, I'll send you some stuff on it. You can look at Littleton did it, and they're in the process of just sort of building it out now.
Okay.
And for the same thing, downtown, trying to build up a little capacity for commercial development.
Yeah, they put a form-based code over there. Yeah, we want to do the same thing, but not in the town center. We want to do it on Air Road.
Uh-huh.
But the town center has only about 3,000 gallons additional sewer capacity.
Right.
And nobody would like to see any kind of infill development at all. They
Right.
just want to leave it
You
pristine.
don't want to see it, right? So to some extent, you probably don't want to increase capacity. On the other hand, there's going to be a time when that has to be renovated or picked up.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, how do you do that? What do you? And there's probably some municipal capacity.
From
Municipal sewer capacity that will be needed.
one of the things that we're looking to do is, if you look at the other side of Route 2, that entire commercial corridor is not likely to connect to the town center system. Right. What the more likely scenario is Devon's has probably 2 million gallons of excess capacity, and we would probably bring it over from Devon's, maybe down Lancaster County Road, connect to Air Road as a force main up to Air Road, and then accessible through the corridor.
So I mean, when I go in Devon's from an outsider, I see the possibility for potentially for a very dense little, exurban city with some sort of transportation connection to Boston. They could become a very, very cool little place.
Yeah.
Because it's like it has infrastructure, it has the space, it has it seems like you could structure it pretty easily that way. And in which case, I would not want to get rid of their
Do you know
capacity.
any of the backstory of the Devon's, why it's a enterprise zone, and the history where it started? Obviously Fort Devens is an army base, and 1998 they converted it to a enterprise zone overseen by Mass Development, and so there was a 50-year time period whereby there had to be a determination through, I believe it's the Acts of 498 or something like that, where they had to determine whether Devens was going to become its own municipality or revert the areas back to each individual town.
Mhm.
And so there's been many efforts and initiatives to try to come up with a solution, and they're starting again. They have a multi-municipality group that is talking about this. I think COVID was kind of the reason that they're shut down now, but there are a lot of different variables. Certainly Harvard would love to have the commercial ratables from Devens, but I mean, there's the other side of the coin too. There's all the costs of municipal services that have to be then provided. And it's a much more dense, much more urban area. And the various departments in the town of Harvard are in no way ready to take on that additional responsibility. So, it's going to be a fiscal question, really. It's going to be whether the long-term fiscal health of taking on Devens is worth it versus the paying for the infrastructure and the municipal services.
And there was a vote at some one point for it to become a town. It was voted down, right?
Yep. And that may happen again through this latest initiative. But this time, I think they're going to hire a facilitator and also, get a full-blown study of all the different variables related to reversion or keeping it as a town. Probably a lot of fiscal impact analysis, marketability studies, and also what you do is if you take Devens and add it to Harvard, you change the dynamic of a largely rural agricultural community.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very much.
And I don't know if the citizens are ready for that or understand
Yeah.
the implications of that.
Suddenly people who had a relative numerical vote as farmers would be wildly outnumbered.
Like upstate New York.
Another interesting thing, and I don't know if Neil's on, but if he is, I'm sure he has some thoughts about this. But they're trying to get Vicksburg Square, which is the old set of dormitory buildings for the Army, very nice historical old buildings. They're deteriorating now, but they want to be able to revitalize them into housing, probably workforce housing to some extent. And that will require the current cap of the number of housing units that the 498 permitted. Devens is trying to get that cap increased. And the implications of that, on one side, the beautiful buildings are rehab, people get affordable housing, et cetera, but also increases the, the vested interests that citizens now living on Devens have in living there as a Devens-oriented community. And they may not want to have a solution whereby the communities take back the land.